We tell ourselves that our neighbors are not our business. That the walls between houses exist for a reason. That privacy is a right. That what happens behind a closed door belongs to the person who closed it. And most of the time, we are right. But there is a point where a closed door becomes something else. Where silence that was once ordinary becomes a weight. Where the absence of someone starts to feel like a presence. The three people in tonight's stories reach that point. They notice something about their neighbors that they could not unknow. Something that seemed small at first. Something that grew. Until one day they realized they had been watching without meaning to, and that what they had seen could not be explained by anything ordinary. Story number 1. 347 days. I want to begin with the number 347. That is the number of days that passed between the last time I saw my neighbor leave his house and the day the police broke down his door. I know the number because I kept count. I kept count because something in me insisted on it. Even when the rational part of me said, "This is none of your business." Even when the social part of me said, "People are allowed to stay home." Something in me kept count. His name was Gerald. He was 64 years old. He had lived next door to me for 11 years. We were not friends. We were neighbors in the truest sense. We nodded at the bins. We raised a hand from our respective driveways. We knew the shape of each other's days. The way you know the shape of furniture you have stopped seeing. Gerald had retired 3 years before the counting began. After that, he was home more. That was normal. That was retirement. But at some point, home more became home always. And home always became never leaving. I noticed the car first. It had not moved in several weeks. This happened before. Gerald sometimes went on holiday. I assumed a holiday. But then the post accumulated. Not overflowed. Not visible from the street. But I noticed, in the way you notice your own letterbox, that his seemed fuller than usual. I knocked on his door. This was day 12. I heard movement inside. I heard the television. No one came to the door. I told myself he had not heard me. I told myself he was in another room. I told myself a lot of things on day 12. I noted it in my phone. Not as a log. Not with any system. Just, knocked on Gerald's door today. No answer. Movement inside. I do not know exactly when the notes became a count. Somewhere around day 40. When I found myself checking his windows. Each morning as I left for work. When I found myself listening for sounds from his side of the wall. When I found myself looking at his wheelie bin on collection day to see if it had been put out. It always had been. That was what made it hard to act. The bins went out. The lights went on and off. The curtains opened in the morning and closed at night. Every visible indicator said, "Someone is living in that house. Just not coming out of it." I called the non-emergency police line on day 90. I told them I had not seen my neighbor in approximately 3 months. They asked if I had concerns for his welfare. I said yes. They said they would do a welfare check. An officer knocked on his door the next day. Gerald answered. He told the officer he was fine. That he had been unwell. That he preferred not to go out at the moment. The officer had no grounds to take the matter further. He told me this. He said, he answered the door. He said he is fine. That is all we can do. I continued counting. Day 180 the curtains stopped opening in the morning. They had always opened. Every day for 11 years. They stopped. Day 210 I stopped hearing the television through the wall. Day 241 I noticed the bin had not gone out. First time. I watched it on the pavement all day. Uncollected. I called again. This time I was specific. I said, the curtains have not opened in 60 days. I said, the bin was not put out this week for the first time. I said, I have not heard any sound through the wall in a month. They sent 2 officers the following morning. Gerald did not answer. They forced entry. Gerald was alive. I want to say that. He was alive, and he was in the house. He had been in the house. He had not left in 347 days. What they found inside, I will not describe in detail. Not out of evasion. Out of respect for Gerald. And for what his house had become. In the time the door stayed closed. He was taken to hospital. He was treated. He recovered. I deleted the count from my phone. But I remember the number. 347. I will remember it. For the rest of my life. Story number 2. The curtains. The thing that bothered me was the curtains. Not that they were closed. That they were always closed. On the left side. Only the left side. The right curtain was always open. The left was always closed. Every day for 2 years. I moved into the flat in September. The woman across the hall, whose name I later learned was Diane, had the curtains like that from the first day I arrived. Right open. Left closed. I noticed it the way you notice something. That is consistent. Not alarming. Just specific. A habit. A preference. Something Diane did that was Diane's business. It became my business on a Wednesday morning in October. A year and 2 months after I moved in. I was leaving for work. I glanced at Diane's door as I always did. Not deliberately. The way your eyes move on a familiar route. Both curtains were open. I stopped. I stood in the corridor and looked at her window. For a moment. Both curtains open. Fully open. The way they had never been in the time I had lived here. I told myself she had changed her routine. People change their routines. I went to work. When I came home that evening, both curtains were closed. Not one open, one closed. Both closed. Completely. The way they had also never been. I stood in the corridor again. This time for longer. Over the next 3 weeks the curtains changed. Every day. Never back to the right open, left closed pattern. I had known for over a year. Instead, both open. Both closed. One then the other. Changing without system. Without the specific habit. That had been Diane's for as long as I had known her. I knocked on her door on the 23rd day. A man answered. I had never seen this man. He was in his 40s. He looked at me without particular expression. I asked if Diane was home. He said, Who? I said, Diane. The woman who lives here. He said he had been living there for 6 weeks. He said the flat had been empty when he moved in. He said he did not know anyone named Diane. I went to the building manager that afternoon. The previous tenant of that flat had vacated 5 months before I knocked on the door. 5 months before the man answered. That was 11 months before I knocked. 11 months before I moved in. I showed the manager the dates. I told him I had seen a woman in that flat. Consistently for over a year. That I had seen her curtains every morning. That I had noticed them. The building manager looked at the records. He looked at me. He said, "That flat has been empty since the previous tenant left." He said there were no records of any subsequent occupant before the current tenant. I do not have an explanation for Diane. For the year I assumed she was my neighbor. For the curtains. For the specific and consistent habit of right open, left closed, that I watched every day. For 14 months. I have moved to a different building. I do not look at my neighbor's curtains anymore. I do not want to notice if something changes. Story number 3. The Deliveries, the Retired Detective. I am a retired detective. I spent 31 years in the police service. I say that not to establish authority, but to explain why I noticed what I noticed, and why I trusted what I noticed, and why I acted on it when most people would not have. My neighbor moved in 4 years ago. The house on my left. A young woman. Late 20s. She told me her name was Claire. We spoke briefly when she moved in. She seemed pleasant. Private. She worked from home, she said. She smiled and went inside. And I did not think about her again for approximately 6 weeks. The thing that made me think about her was her shopping. Online deliveries. She received them every 3 or 4 days. This was ordinary. Many people do this. What was not ordinary was the quantity. I was in my front garden one afternoon when a delivery driver left 3 large boxes at her door. I noticed because 3 large boxes is a notable delivery. 3 days later, 4 more boxes. A week after that, 6. Over the following 2 months, I began to form a rough estimate of the volume of goods entering that house. The estimate was significantly larger than one person would require. I am a retired detective. I did not jump to conclusions. I simply kept an informal record. The deliveries continued. The boxes were always taken inside immediately. No boxes ever came back out. No recycling was put at the curb. No waste beyond a single bin bag per week. On a quiet Sunday in spring, I found a reason to be at my front boundary. When Claire came to accept a delivery, we exchanged the usual pleasantries. I asked, conversationally, whether she had been collecting for anything. A charity. A project. She smiled. She said she just liked to have things. She took the boxes inside. I went back into my house and I sat down. And I thought about what 31 years had taught me about people who just like to have things. I called a former colleague. Not in any official capacity. Over coffee. I described what I had observed. I described Claire. My colleague was quiet for a moment. Then she asked me one question. She asked, "Have you ever seen anyone else enter or leave that house?" I thought about it. In 2 years of living next door to Claire, I had never seen another person enter or leave her house. Not a friend. Not a family member. Not a tradesperson. Not a visitor of any kind. Only the delivery drivers, who left boxes. And left. My colleague asked me to describe the boxes. I told her what I could. Various sizes. Various suppliers. No consistent pattern in the packaging. She told me to report it. Not as a complaint. Not as an accusation. As an observation. She told me the precise words to use. With the relevant team, I made the report. 3 weeks later, 2 officers knocked on Claire's door. I will not detail the outcome here, because the matter was subject to ongoing proceedings at the time of this account. What I will tell you is that the officers did not leave quickly, and that what they found inside required further attendance. Claire moved out shortly after. The house has been empty since. I still sit in my front garden. I still notice what I notice. 31 years taught me that the most important evidence is almost always the thing that seems too ordinary to mention. The quantity of boxes, the absence of visitors, the recycling that never appears, the thing you almost did not say, because you did not want to seem like you were watching, but you were, and it mattered. We are trained from childhood to mind our own business, to give people their privacy, to assume the best, to look away. And most of the time, looking away is the right thing. But not always. A man who had not left his house in 347 days. A woman behind a curtain that no one could account for. A house receiving more than one person could use. And never having a visitor. In all three cases, someone paid attention. Someone kept count. Someone said, "I do not care if this makes me seem strange. Something is wrong." And in all three cases, something was. Pay attention to your neighbors. Not in fear. Not in suspicion. In the same quiet way that the person next door might one day be paying attention to you. Thank you for listening. Comment your story. I read every story sent to me. For new stories, subscribe my channel and look up from your phone. When you get home tonight, notice what your street looks like. Notice what is different. Notice what should not be.